Hello and welcome to another Meta Monday analysis with me, Skari, your grateful host. This is the Spire. I'm here in the height of the Spire, and I'm bringing another Meta Monday analysis to you. So Meta Monday is essentially a weekly show that I normally do for Patreons, and I've decided to do another one for everyone. I must be going mad. But hello and welcome. It's a chance for usually every week for people to ask questions, like Patreon questions, for me to review army lists, and most of all, to dive into the juicy bits of competitive 40k that happened this weekend. I have one main event that I'm going to be talking about today, and that is the Brisbane GT Down Under, and it is a doozy. There are like eight lists or so that I really want to touch on. I'm very, very excited to share it with everyone, and I hope you sit back, you relax, and let's kind of see what is doing the rounds. If you have any questions and you're watching live, you can also put questions in, because I've opened this up for everyone. And if you missed the live show, you're always welcome to tune in as a Patreon every week, or wait till I do another one like this for everybody to participate as well. But enjoy it. Tarzan, hello. How are you? Nice to see you. It has been awesome. It has been amazing. Of course, as you might have been lured in here by the thumbnail, that was me going crazy over the Space Marine Codex. Why? Because I feel like Space Marines are everywhere. Don't you think? I think that's kind of how this is going. Totally over the thumbnail. I just thought about it on the fly. I had my Space Marine Codex in the background, and I was like, what would be really funny? To totally make a face while pointing at the Space Marine Codex. Why? Because that's literally what we live in. However, the Brisbane GT had a very good variety of lists. I cannot wait to sort of dive through them, break them down, discuss them in a little bit more detail, because there's a good variety of lists at the top level in this 40-plus person 5-round GT. And anytime that you have a big event like this in Warhammer 40,000, and you can physically sort of kind of see elements that people are working with, and that's sort of how the meta is created, is when, pioneers of list building take them to events and showcase what different list builds can do. We had a Tyrannus Genius Cult list do really well by Eric Letharus, who's also on the Art of War team. Basically, hello, Gaz, how is it going? And Lauren, yes, you're here for the thumbnail. I agree. I think it's a great reason to be here as well. Hold on, let me just turn the volume down on my Spotify here, because it's literally making me go crazy. It's like this crazy classical music thing. I'm usually EDM is more my style, of course. I also kind of fixed the backdrop here so you don't see the plastic and insulation. So the studio is pretty much done. I just need to finish some of the artwork around the side, but you're not here for that. You're not here for art deco. I'm not going to teach you how to nail things to walls, although I could totally do that and do a how-to video. I think that'd be entertaining. You're here for the meta, and you're going to stay for me to talk about lists. Skari, get to the point. After this, we'll be going through questions. I opened up the floor to questions from everyone, not just the Patreons this week, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, on everything. So make sure that you stay tuned for the questions and answer period at the end after we go through all these lists, as well as some list ideas where you get to submit a list and I break it down for you. So we're going to be here for a good 45 minutes to an hour and a half. Really depends on how long it takes us to get through all this information. So get your notepads, write down your favorite ideas, and then go and implement them if you can, of course, being safe with the current pandemic, as well as, maybe on TTS and things like that. Where the bodies hang off the walls, pain and suffering. Hey, Reamer, how's it going? Well, that's in the dungeon of the Spire. This is the topmost level of the Spire, and this is more of the business, gathering area. then we go into the dungeon to the coven stuff, and it gets kind of weird and creepy. So let's dive into the meta for the week. Brisbane 40k GT, a 41-person 5-round GT. We're not having, of course, very many of those worldwide, simply because of the fact that we have a pandemic going on worldwide. I hope everybody's staying safe out there. Make sure you're being safe, staying safe for you and your family. It's pretty crazy, like how it's like going on in the world. So luckily enough, in Australia, they're able to have a big GT. So awesome. Let's start with the top. Shout out, by the way, to Michael Mienches. Cool. Michael, who came in 11th. Now, he had a Craft World and Harlequin list. I'm not going to discuss on it too much because there's a full Harlequin list in this like full breakdown. But he basically had like Falcons, some Wraith Lords, and then basically fusion boats, and that's it. No bikes or anything. It was just mostly fusion boats and a couple of Falcons and like Wraith Seers. And he came in 11th out of 41, so not terrible. Just a quick shout out, since he is an Eldari player, and I have sort of like a soft spot for Eldari armies. Who knew, considering that's kind of like the thing that I play all the time. So then we go to the top 10. So top 10, basically out of 40 players, it's a 40, like a 25% of the field. And the thing that really stood out the most to me was how like the variety at the top of this list. Are there any Drukhari players up here? No. However, it's really cool to see this variety, because I don't know about you, but that gives me faith in the system. If I see the same list 10 times in the top 10, I know there's a problem. Kind of like when we had Iron Hands late last season, and it was like Iron Hand, Iron Hand, Iron Hand, Iron Hand, Iron Hand, Iron Hand, Iron, there was so many of them everywhere. Now at least we're seeing some variety. I think player skill is rewarded a lot more in this edition than it was in 8th edition, because of the nuances of the way that you want to score your secondaries, as well as you score your primary points, which means practice and an innate understanding of the rule game mechanics tends to win out as to just like what style of like mission, of army that you're building. So let's start with number 10, Jordan Bennett. Jordan Bennett ran a Blood Angel with Assassins list. Very similar to a list that I saw this weekend at a local Rogue Trader tournament, a small, 12-person tournament that I ran this weekend. And it's cool to see Blood Angels. They are Space Marines, of course. They got a big boost with Psychic Awakening. And I cannot wait to see what the new codex has an impact on them. But the style of list is very similar to what I've seen in Blood Angel books or in Blood Angel lists. So, it's nice to see that sort of like list archetype still works. So if you like your Blood Angels at home, consider something like this for your next game. Of course, these are 2,000 points, and they're, for like GT mission pack missions. But we have Astarath. It is a battalion detachment with Astarath the Grim, a Sanguinary Priest with a jump pack, the Sanguinor, who is the Warlord, 3 Incursor squads. That's it, just straight up Incursors. And then a Death Company squad of 13 strong with 4 Thunderhammers. Interesting choice with the 13, considering, you allow blast weapons to get like max attacks on them. Sanguinary Ancient with the Standard of Sacrifice for the Feel No Pain. 1, 2, 3 units of Sanguinary Guard, 8 strong. 2 of them with 4 axes and swords, 1 of them with 4 fists and swords, and a Calexus Assassin. And that is 2,000 points. Now, the way that this list works is very, straightforward. You basically can put a lot of pressure on your opponent early on with the Incursor squads and kind of like take the mid board, and then use something like the Death Company or the Sanguinary Guard to really kind of put a lot of pressure. And a lot of the times that list doesn't really need to play turn 1, turn 2. It can kind of hide. And then when it gets buffed up, when it hits the Assault Doctrine, they basically all jump out and try hit you at once to sort of overwhelm you, fold your army in half, and then kind of go from there. Right? By the way, if you haven't clicked that like button, make sure you do. Help the video get noticed on YouTube. Give it up for those Blood Angels. So then we have in 9th place, Aaron Green. Aaron Green ran Space Wolves. So there we have. You have Blood Angels with an Assassin. Now the Assassin, by the way, Calexis Assassin, my favorite Assassin. I think the ability to burn command points, deep strike closer, ignore invulnerable saves in close combat, decent damage, kind of like advance and charge, or like she can do like crazy stuff with some of the stratagems that she does. I honestly think she is one of the best assassins that you can use. So onto Space Wolves. Now Space Wolves got a huge boost in Psychic Awakening, and I've seen, especially locally, a lot of Space Wolves sort of like really come up to the top from what was a lot of obscurity in the past, mainly with a bunch of dreadnoughts, like lots of dreadnoughts, especially when they were objectives secured, which really sort of like super powered or supercharged that faction. Because if you're trying to deal with like 7 or 8 dreadnoughts, it's not as easy as it sounds, because all your anti-infantry weaponry is basically useless. And the fact that they could sort of sit on objectives, take the objectives away from you, that was very, very crazy. So Aaron Green, Brisbane GT, Saga of the Wolverine is the name of his list. Awesome. It's a battalion with Ragnar Blackmane. By the way, if you're playing Space Wolves and not running Ragnar, why? Because Ragnar is so good. He's 20 points more than Drazar, and he is an absolute monster. Wolfguard Battle Leader with Jump Pack, Storm Shield, and Thunderhammer. So basically a Smash Captain. A Wolf Priest with a Jump Pack and a Power Fist. 2 units of Assault Intercessors. Those are quite popular nowadays. 2 Infiltrator Squads. Interesting choice on the Infiltrators. They sort of started declining a little bit in popularity lately, or towards late 8th edition. But I feel like all of the troop squads for Primaris and Space Marines are pretty solid. It just depends on your playstyle. 2 units of Blade Guard Veteran. A Judicar. That Judicar, by the way, with the Fight Last aura ability, is incredibly strong. If you haven't put one in your list yet, I highly recommend you do. A Wolfen Squad of 5. A Wolfen Squad of 5. 2 units of Fenrisian Wolves, whatever 35 points worth of Fenrisian Wolves is, but that's great for screening and blocking. It's what I've been using my Razorwing Flux for in my competitive list. 1 Eradicator Squad and 2 Stormbolters, 2 Impulsors with Shield Domes. Yeah, pretty standard. 2,000 points on the nose. Got a couple of Wolfen Squads to put a lot of pressure on the opponent. Impulsors can take the Blade Guards and the Assault Intercessors around. And then you've got Ragnar in there as well. And then the Wolfguard Battle Leader and the Wolf Priest basically jumping around, buffing stuff around them. So it's a high pressure list. You definitely have to play a little cagey using terrain to your advantage. But, Space Wolves are no joke. When they hit you in close combat, they will kill your stuff. So you have to either bait them out so they can expose their units and then counter, or you have to feed them things that you don't care about while you try and score points. Hello, Caleb. Do you mean Callus, my man? Yes, I meant Callus. I might have said Calexis. My apologies. My apologies. Gaz says Forge World are releasing Unit Compendium over the next 2 to 3 months with all factions unit rules. True. So hopefully Tantalus will not be going to Legends. I doubt they will, because they still produce the Tantalus. A lot of armies removed, like Elysian, and yeah, I could see that. Now, Forge World has definitely always shaken up the meta, and I think it's a good thing to have Forge World. I think getting more variety for your lists is good, even though they're not balanced. But then again, the game itself isn't balanced. So adding in other unbalances doesn't really imbalance the game more. It's just increases the like combinations that you can have. But I'm all for Forge World ever since it was not a thing, to allow Forge World into like, your local RTT. I always thought Forge World was the coolest thing ever. Finally ended up, got myself like, oh, sorry, my little wonky camera here. But yes, agreed. By the way, thanks a lot for tuning in, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. And if you have a comment, make sure you put it over there in the chat box. And if not, no problem. Leave a comment down below, as well as giving that like button a thumbs up so the more people can watch the show as well. So that was 9th place. And then in 8th, we had Luke Pierce. And he was running Grey Knights. So here we go. Top 10. The last 3 of the top 10 are Space Marines. You have, 10th, 9th, and 8th. And this would be 8th, right? No, 10th, 9th. So we had... Okay, well, this is Brett. No, this is Luke's. Okay, yeah, 8th. Cool. And he's running Grey Knights. Awesome. And he's from the Normal Blokes. Great podcast, by the way, if you get a chance to listen to it. But it is a patrol detachment. And you have a chaplain, a Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knight, which is awesome, with a Gatling silencer and a heavy side cannon. Awesome. A Tech Marine. Nice. 5 strikes, and 5 Terminators as troops. All in a patrol, by the way. Oh, no, it's a battalion detachment. I don't know why it said. I thought it said patrol. It's a battalion. It's like you can't have 3 HQs in a patrol. It's a battalion detachment. Then you have a patrol detachment with a Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knight, 10 Terminators, and 2 Venerable Dreadnoughts with twin last cannon, Dreadnought with Somba. That's very cool because this list is a list that is extremely similar to lists that you've seen me play in like 8th edition against Matt, Alfarius Matt, who used to run 3 Nemesis Dread Knights and then a combination of things from like Razorbacks to Dreadnoughts with last cannons to Paladins to Terminators, all this stuff. So it's kind of cool to see. A list do so well, or a very similar list do so well at a GT. I do have a feeling that obscuring terrain has a big impact on the game itself. Being able to hide your Nemesis Dread Knights, because they're big monsters, right? They were really tall, but they don't have enough wounds to be seen through obscuring terrain. So, especially if the terrain is decent at the events you're going to, larger units like that tend to have... tend to be more useful when they don't just get shot down instantly after, somebody can like draw line of sight to them. And personally, I think that's good for the game. So congratulations to Luke Pierce. But, it's definitely different than the average like Paladins. He still has the Terminators, has some strike squads, like the mix, and then he's got the bully units of the Dread Knights kind of getting in your face as well. So let me move into 7th place with Brent Piggott. And he is running Death Guard. Now, Death Guard, / Chaos Demons is definitely something I would expect to start being at the top with the current meta. By the way, Caleb, yes, Calidus Assassins are the most universal assassin. Now, something on a side note I really like about the Assassins and the way that they work currently is, number one, you don't lose any special, like, chapter tactics or, bolt of discipline. You don't lose any of your rules like you used to by having an assassin in a Space Marine list, which I think is a great thing. And secondly, you pay points for the assassin instead of CP, and you only pay CP for the assassin if you want to switch the assassin to a different assassin pre-game. I think, so it still gives you the Pokeball assassin. However, if you have an assassin that you really like the Calidus or the Vindicare or the Eversor, or whatever your favorite assassin is, you can just take that assassin in for 100 points. And you can switch it out if you need to. However, all your CPs are intact, considering that's how that works. So I think that's pretty cool, personally. So we have a battalion detachment of Death Guard, the Poxmongers, which is a very popular, chapter trait or whatever for the Plague Company. With a Chaos Lord, with the Contaminated Monstrosity and the Worm Spitter, and a Demon Prince of Nurgle with my Arc Contaminator, the Iron Clot Furnace, of course, because why not? Then he has 2 units of Plague Marines. One is 6, 7, 8, 9 strong. 9, 10 strong. 9 with 2 flails. Cool, 9 with 2 flails. And we have 5 with 2 flails. 10 Poxwalkers. Anything that's like immune to morale and can just sit on an objective is worth its weight in gold. Putrefier, Biologus. A Foul Blightspawn, that's the Flamer Bro. So he basically makes things that charge not count as charging. So with the new combat dynamic, he basically allows you to attack first, which is really cool. As well as a Tallyman. He's the one that has the cool aura ability for the plasma grenades, basically the grenade bomb. He's really good with that. 3 Mephitic Blighthaulers, keeps everything around them in cover, and they get +1 hit when there's 3 or more in them. But they also have some really cool aura buffs as well, or stratagems that lower AP from enemy units, that sort of thing, which is pretty cool. Then we have 3 Plague Burst Crawlers, a Rhino with Contaminated Monstrosity for the Feel No Pain, a Poxbringer, and then a Detachment Patrol of Nurgle Demons. Poxbringer, 3 Nurglings, 3 Nurglings, 3 Nurglings. That also means that with that Poxbringer, you get access to the Nurgle Locus. So in close combat, the Nurgle Marines are going to be doing, or everything that's Nurgle is going to be doing more damage on 6s to wound, which makes it, kind of like a double threat. They can do some shooting, and they can do a lot more damage in combat as well. Sean Smith. Hello, Sean. How are you? Says, hey, Skari, what do you think is the best way to run witches? I'll get to the questions at the end of the segment. Absolutely. That's a great question. I'll get to that once we get to the question segment. Thank you for your question, Sean. I really appreciate it. So there you have it. That's a pretty standard Death Guard list. He's using the Mephitic Blighthaulers and the Plague Bush Crawlers, and he does have 1 Rhino. Normally you see it with a drill, so you can deep strike and whatnot, but you can sort of outflank if you really need to, that sort of thing. And then the Nurglings are excellent. They can zone out the middle of the table. They can take objectives in the backfield. They're small. They're annoying, and all that good stuff, which is no doubt why he went so well. So then we go into the 6th list, Liam Hackett. Now, if you haven't heard that name before, you haven't been playing Warhammer 40,000 competitively. Most of these names, because they're always at the top of the rankings internationally. But Liam Hackett, he ran a list called Life is Cheap on Valhalla. So, yeah. Let's see what he did. It's an Astra Militarum list, because why not? Astra Militarum, they don't get as much love as they could, in my opinion. I think Guard have some cool little combos and stuff, even though they're probably considered one of the shit tiers, sort of like with the Drukhari, which is funny because I don't feel that way about my Drukhari, but they're not an easy army to play. So I can see why people would be like, well, that's shit and that's shit. But that's why I don't listen to the internet a lot of the times when it comes to negative comments, because no. So it's a battalion detachment of Astra Militarum. The regimental doctrine is gunnery experts and spotter details. He has a tank ace in there. So 3 tank commanders with a last cannon each one, and 3 demolisher cannons. 3 demolisher tank commanders with last cannons. In my opinion, one of the better loadouts. I really like the demolisher tank. Then we have 5 Scions, 5 Scions, 5 Scions, 5 Scions. So 4 units of 5 Scions with no upgrades. They have a built-in deep strike. They're infantry, so you can move them around the table. They're great at getting secondary objectives. They can sort of bully isolated units when they deep strike as well. So all in all, adding Scions to a Guard list is a good choice. I really, really like that he put them in there. 2 Manticores with full payload. Now that means that the Manticores do 3 straight damage with their guns. They have 4 missiles each, which is a lot less of an issue now with only 5 turns. And honestly, they are great. For 138 points, you can't, like, they will kill. They just they lack a lot of high armor piercing, so they're only AP 2. However, they will pack a wallop at strength 10 and 3 straight damage for those Manticore missiles. If you haven't been on the receiving end of those things, 2d6 shots, like, they can hurt big time. Then he has a 2nd Battalion detachment of Valhallans. Why Valhallans? Because of the because of stuff. But he has a company commander. Sorry, 3 company commanders. Awesome. When you look at this, I'm like, company commanders? Why? Why do you need 3 of them? He's taking a Laurels of Command for regenerating command points, which is great. And no Warlord trait, tank ace instead. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units of 10 guardsmen with no upgrades. So if you're counting, that's 60 infantry plus another 20 infantry and scions. So 20 that can deep strike, 60 that put up screens and move onto objectives and stop you from scoring points. You kind of get the drift here. Then he has in elites, he has 3 command squads with plasma guns. That's why he has the company commanders, because you can have 1 command squad per commander. But it's 64 points for 4 plasma guns. And then Valhallans, of course, have a really cool order, cool stratagems as well. Awesome. And then 1, 2, 3 veteran squads with flamers, with a shotgun of 3 flamers. So these are more elites. That's 30 more guys, plus another 12. So another 44 infantry. And then 2 heavy weapon teams with mortars. So if you're doing the math, that's a lot of models. He's got all the infantry he needs. He also has 21 points left, which I guess he could have spent on stuff, but decided not to. But that's a flex right there, being like, I didn't even use 1980 points. I used 1979 points. 21 points. I could have put in some like rattlings with that. Nope, I don't care. Don't even want to put anything in. Awesome. But Liam Hackett, great job. That's a lot of infantry, just tank commanders, the Manticores. It just saturates the table with objective secured bodies, and then has the firepower to eliminate key targets. And that's the key. When you're doing an infantry horde, you need to have units that can kill things as well. And we'll see that with Eric's list as well, which is very saturation heavy. But we'll see as the meta start. Like, the Australian meta has always been very horde focused, but I could see that bleeding into the current meta, like internationally as well. So if you haven't clicked that like button, make sure you do. Really appreciate that. As we move on to... That was Liam. Liam was in 6th place. Now top 5 for the Brisbane GT. We have Brian Lakeland. And this is where things start getting interesting. Well, not that it hasn't already been interesting, but he was playing with Harlequins. Ooh. Harlequins, of course, very powerful. If you haven't watched my latest battle report against Harlequins, please do. Really fun game. Really showcases some of the strengths of Harlequins. So he's gone for the Frozen Stars mask, which means you get extra attacks when you charge. Seems like it's very meta-driven because there's a lot of horde in his meta, so he wants to make sure he can go in and kill a bunch of models. But he's running a Shadow Seer and 2 Troop Masters, which seems to be a pretty standard sight. Troop Master, of course, has, the Twilight Fang, which is super, super important. Then we have 1, 2, 3 units of troops with 5 fusions, or 2 with 4 fusions, 1 with 5. They probably go in the gunboats. And then 2 units of 10. So 2 units of 10, 3 units of 5. A Death Jester with Humbling Cruelty for Ignore Overwatch and it's slowing you down, as well as a Solitaire. Now, although even though Solitaire is really good, I feel a lot of Harlequin players are starting to sort of move away from the Solitaire in that sense. And they're really taking him more as a psychological weapon than anything, not because he's not as sort of like gung ho as he used to be. Basically, I feel like, but he's still like really good, but he's not as good as he was. That sort of like Troop Master with Twilight's Fang fills very similar role in the list for cheaper. And then we have 5, 5, and 2 Skyweavers, which are the jet bikes with Haywire cannons and Zephyr glaives, and 3 Starweavers. That's 2,000 points on the nose. That's an excellent list, something that I would even consider playing with. Very, very standard stuff. And no wonder he did well. The 2 troop units on foot are more resilient than you might think. He doesn't really have to commit them to the table, and he can double move them. They can hide. They're incredibly versatile. I used to play Harlequins, or when I did play Harlequins, I the core of my list was 2 12-strong units on foot, and they were great with the the minus range against them, the -2 wound, that sort of thing. It can get very, very tough to bring them down. And in a meta like this, especially with Frozen Stars, I think they're very, very versatile. The other option, of course, is to take the Soaring Spite so they can advance and shoot, but he's only running 3 boats, more in a supporting role than anything. So by the time you get stuck in, you don't really need that extra movement distance for the advance and shoot. But that is Brian's list. So now we go into the 4th place, Joshua Mcgowan. Joshua Mcgowan. Now, that is another name for the Australian meta. Like, these are all names you should be committing to memory, because and all of this stuff, by the way, I'm finding on downunderpairings.com. So Best Coast Pairings does some, Down Under Pairings does some as well. And then there's one that they use a lot in Europe as well. If somebody could link it in the comments, that would be great, because I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but it's the one we used for ETC. So there's a couple of different pairing softwares. This is one of them. Very good pairing software. And recently them and BCP, I believe, announced a merger. So we have Joshua Mcgowan playing Adeptus Mechanicus. That's right. Another one of the top factions that we've been discussing over the last couple of months makes an appearance in the top 4 or top 5. Are we top 5 now or top 4? Top 4. Yep. So we have a battalion detachment. Manipulus, 2 Manipuluses. Dominus. So reroll 1s, and it is... No, it's a Data Horde Forge World, Magna Bonded Alloys, and the secondary Transnode Power Cores, which is all spelled out like that, Joshua, just to confuse the hell out of your opponents, because nobody knows what those do. So let's do some quick little research here, just so we understand what he decided to take. Of course, why would we? Why would we, let his confusion, mean that we don't understand what this list is supposed to do? I don't think it's done in a mean way or anything. It's just funny because when people tend to write everything on an army list, and you can take note for like competitive games, if they write like every little thing, take the time to really like understand what it is instead of like getting overwhelmed by the name. Because people will write the entire name of something or a piece of war gear or relic or whatever on the army list, just to like, stop you from reading it, because you're like, whatever, you can tell me what it does after, basically. Okay, so we've got the primary is the Magna Bonded Alloys. So we have the Magna Bonded Alloys. Where is that? When a vehicle model with this dogma would lose a wound, on a 6, that wound is not lost. So 6 up feeling pain for all the vehicles. Cool. And the second one is Transnode Power Cores. When resolving an attack made with an arc weapon, an unmodified hit of 5 or 6 scores 1 additional hit. So they do more shots on 5s and 6s or more hits, and they have a 6 up feel no pain on all his vehicles. Okay, cool. So he has 5 breaches, 5 breaches, 5 breaches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cool. With heavy, guess what? Arc rifles, which means 5s and 6s do extra hits. Awesome. and 2 Scorpius Disintegrators. Nice. So the Disintegrators are there. They have a feel no pain, but it's really there for the, extra hits on 5s and 6s on the Breachers because they do a lot of shots. Cool. And they're good against vehicles and everything. Then he has an outrider detachment of Styges. Styges being the one that can, pre-game move and is -1 to be shot at. But we have 5 Raiders, 5 Raiders, 5 Raiders. Yes. So that's 5 units of attack dogs. Now those, by the way, are incredibly, incredibly powerful. If you don't know what they do, pick up a AdMech book, read the Raiders. They get pre-game moves. They can't double up their pre-game move with the Styges move. No, that's with the Styges. But they can move. They can block you. If you charge them, they can fall back. They get really annoying very, very quickly. And they can also snipe characters and do mortal wounds on 6s to wound with their pistols. So, they're an all-round excellent unit for 60 points. It's crazy. 5 Taraxi Sterilizers, so 2 times 5 with torches, basically. So they're essentially flamer jetpack infantry. However, they have some cool stratagems that allow them to, say, tie you up in combat and prevent you from falling back, which can be very, very powerful, especially against infantry, where you're just trying to stop people from running away and stop them from maneuvering or getting around the place. That sort of mechanic, like the Slaanesh mirror, witches with nets, or just witches in general, Slaanesh fiends and other stuff like that, as well as some of the other chaos things that they have, or the snare captain from White Scars, and then in this case Sterilizers that can hold you in combat. They don't have to survive, but if they can stop you from moving, that can be game winning, especially if you need a turn to sort of readjust. All in all, not what you would normally see other than the Breachers and the Disintegrators, but it's really in that Styges detachment that there's a little bit of shenanigans going on, that the skill level really shows through when he's playing it, I'm sure. And that is Joshua's Adeptus Mechanicus list. Now, if you are watching and you have any questions, make sure you put them in the chat, please, and thank you. We'll get to the Q&A section not too long from now. But now we dive into the top 3 of the Brisbane GT. Yep. And in number 3, drumroll, we have Eric Letharus, who pioneered the Gaunt carpet, which was 200 Termagants and Old One Eye. So I wouldn't be surprised that this has something to do with a bunch of models. It's a Tyranid battalion with the High Fleet Adaptive Exoskeleton and Shrewd Predators, which I don't actually have that on me at the moment. Yeah, I don't have the Tyranid one on me. Wah, wah, wah. So we'll have to, anybody wants to tell us what that does in the chat, please do. But I can look it up in a second. But we have a Broodlord, a Broodlord, and a Broodlord. So it's 3 Broodlords. Now, you know how I said about things that do damage in your horde list? Having Broodlords hidden amongst a bunch of Termagants is the damage, because he moves them up in waves and stuff, and the Broodlords really go out and sort of pick targets and focus on things that they can kill. And you can use overrun to jump in, jump back, that sort of thing. 3 units of 24 Termagants, 2 units of 10 Hormagaunts, which in a lot of ways are a lot more dangerous than the Termagants, because they get the 6-inch pile-in, 6-inch consolidate. So after they charge, they get another 12 inches of movement, and they can really pin units in or tie tanks up or units. They're really annoying to deal with. Then we have a Tyrannus Patrol with the same High Fleet with Old One Eye. And then 3 units of 25 Termagants, 3 Venom Thropes for a -1 to hit bubble on everything, and a Lictor. Lictor, great to do actions, to jump in and out. He's excellent. No Overwatch stratagem. You're going to start seeing Lictors a lot more in Tyranid lists. And last but not least, a Genestealer Cult Patrol that is Twisted Helix with a Patriarch, which is essentially a 4th Broodlord, right? With Mind Control and Mental Onslaught. 8 acolytes with hand flamers, 10 acolytes with 4 rock saws and an icon, and a Sanctus with a bio dagger. That Sanctus with the bio dagger is mean. He is another close combat monster. So there you have it. You have the Patriarch close combat monster. You have the bio Sanctus, the Sanctus with the bio dagger combat monster. 3 Broodlords combat monsters. Old One-Eye combat monster. 4 rock saws and acolyte unit combat monster. The 8 acolytes with hand flamers is like a screen clearer, get within 3 inches of an enemy unit sort of thing. Venom Thropes to keep the horde at -1 to be hit all the time. And then 50, 150, 180 Termagants or whatever it is. Now that is what I call a list. Awesome, awesome list. The thing about that is it's very good to play a list like that. You need 2 things. One, you need to have things that can kill enemy units, which he has plenty of. He just has to sort of make sure there's gaps in the horde, like the lines of the horde, to jump in, kill something, and sort of bounce in and out and bounce back, that sort of thing. And secondly, it's to not get like move blocked, essentially, because when you have so many units or models, it's easy to sort of clutter them too much and sort of prevent your movement. So it's a great list, but you have to be very, very capable of understanding where you're going to be moving all these models, as well as taking the time and the quick time to just quickly grab models and move them in quick succession, considering the new unit coherency rules and being within aura buffs and all this stuff, right? So I'm very curious. I would love to see a live stream to see how the ebb and flow of his giant blobs of forces would have taken over the whole table. I thought that would have been really cool. But that is Eric's list. In second, we have Hayden Walduck. And he's running Imperial Fist's successors. Ooh. So, Adeptus Astartes, Imperial Fists, they're really strong. They kill tanks. They shoot a lot, basically. They're pretty awesome. Okay. He Master Artisans and Stealthy, because why not? And he's running a battalion detachment with a Calidus assassin. What did we say about the Calidus? She's popping up everywhere. Super versatile. If you're an Imperial player, I actually have an old school one painted up that I can use whenever I want with my Black Templars, which, by the way, Black Templars have some crazy strats. If you don't know what Devout Push does, go to the Faith and Fury book right now, look up Devout Push, and it doesn't seem like a lot until you realize it can be used in your opponent's turn. It can be used after you advance. It can be used after you disembark from a transport. It's incredibly good. You can even use it after doing actions. Just look it up. Or while doing actions. It's so cool. Anyway, I got sidetracked there for a second. Captain on a Bike. Tech Marine. Nice. I like it. Master of the Forge with the Eye of Hypnoth. Cool. Intercessor Squad. Is this a patrol? There's only two troops. So it's definitely not a battalion. So it's probably a patrol. 2 Invictor Tactical War Suits with the autocannons. Invictor suits are amazing for Space Marines. You can put them up close to put a lot of pressure on your opponent. You can deploy them back. It gives you a lot of versatility. The Devastator Squad Grav Cannon Drop Pod unit. Excellent choice. A Thunderfire Cannon and 2 Eradicator Squads. How does he have 4 heavy support choices in this list? 1, 2, 3, 4. He has 4 heavy support choices in this list, so he might have split them up into 2 patrols, basically, is what it might be. A Storm Talon gunship. Haven't seen one of those in a while. Nice. And and then a drop pod and 2 impulsors. Of course, the impulsors for the intercessors to keep them safe. So you have to crack open the impulsors, get to the dedicated transport guys inside. The impulsor can move, disembark a unit of Space Marines. The Space Marines can then move after that and stuff, getting them onto objectives. Like, impulsors make Space Marines faster than Black Templars, and it's absolutely crazy in my opinions. So I really like it personally, and that's what I think as well. Sorry, my Discord is going crazy in my brain, so I had to put it on Do Not Disturb. Okay. And that is Hayden and his list. Millith says, hey Skari, have you seen any competitive Inari lists lately? What do you think some good combos in a triple troll? That's a great question, Millith, and I'll get to that when we get to the question section. So stick around. I'll get to your question, which is funny. I literally just recorded an episode with Adam Camilleri on the Art of War Down Under on Inari. It's a good 2 hours of us talking Inari, so I'm glad you asked. And last but not least, in number 1 place, we have Dan Savage and none other but Demons. What? Demons, you say? Yeah, Chaos Demons. It's a battalion detachment of Chaos Undivided Demons with a Great Unclean One that's an Exalted Greater Demon. Horticulus Stimulux, which is the dude that plants trees, but he's like a Demon Prince. A Lord of Change with a Exalted Lord of Change. 20 Bloodletters. 1, 2, 3 units of 3 Nurglings. 23 Plague Bearers. A unit of 5. 2 units of 5 Beasts of Nurgle and 1 unit of 8 Beasts of Nurgle, and 4 Flamers, 5 Flamers as each. What a weird list, right? Is it just me? Or is this like the weirdest list you've ever heard in your life for demons? It's crazy. Oh, it hasn't come out yet, Millith. It's probably going to be coming out next week. It's just being edited right now, actually. We literally just recorded it. So, let me do that again. This is the number 1 demon list. Are you ready for this? A battalion detachment of Chaos Demons that is undivided. A Great Unclean One with the Doomsday Bell, so that you can bring back demons, basically. And he's exalted. He's an exalted Greater Demon. Horticulus Stimulux, that basically gives aura buffs and stuff. A Lord of Change with the Impossible Road, and he's the Warlord. So very hard to kill Lord of Change. 20 Bloodletters with the icon. 3 Nurglings, 3 Nurglings, 3 Nurglings. 23 Plague Bearers. 5 Beasts of Nurgle. 5 Beasts of Nurgle. 8 Beasts of Nurgle, which, by the way, 8 Beasts of Nurgle, like Beasts of Nurgle, one of the best point-for-point wounds you can get in the game. They are very tough to get rid of. And 5 Flamers as each. 1999 points. What in the world? Dan Savage. That's what we like to call absolutely savage. Oh my goodness gracious. That was amazing. Thank you very much, Dan, for that. A lovely, lovely list. Made me really, really happy inside. So with that, we go into the Q&A section because that was pretty much the main thing. Some really cool creative lists that we went in there. I open it up to the Patreons essentially. So, everybody got to ask questions, but I'm going to go over the Patreon questions first, and then we'll get to everybody else's questions. But thank you so much for tuning in so far. Let's dive into some of the nitty gritty when it comes to the questions that folks have had, as well as some maybe lists that people might want me to review and kind of give them thumbs up, thumbs down, that sort of thing. So Jason, Patreon since September. Awesome. Thank you, Jason. What matchups are the worst for 6 Talos? Talking about Drukhari. And is there anything that can be done if they run into those matchups? So playing a lot of Talos, I find that the worst matchups are things that can either volume or firepower you down, like Custodes, for example, or volume, like just give you lots and lots of wounds that do a lot of damage, like Custodes and stuff like that. Or stuff that tends to negate your invulnerable save or your high toughness. So things like mortal wounds, like Thousand Suns, that sort of thing, can be very hard to deal with Talos if they keep their distance. As soon as something gets really close, it's a lot easier to deal with them. But I would say like anything that has a like null zone or a death hex style list, anything that has a lot of mortal wounds, like zone thropes, Zinch lists, that sort of thing, and things like Custodes, which one-on-one have like some really cool defensive buffs, so they can really take the punch out of the Talos and then hit you back just as hard and kill your army pretty much instantly. Like Alaris Terminators will just eat through Talos, basically. So is there anything that can be done if they run to these matchups? A lot of the times you have to learn which units of yours are going to die the fastest and acknowledge that and play as if you don't have those units. So keep the units that are more important to you alive to take objectives. A lot of the times I just focus on trying to stop my opponent from scoring any points while scrounging points. So denying their objectives, trying to get my secondaries, trying to stop them from getting theirs. And I just play to the mission a lot more than playing against that list. I just try and play to win the mission, basically. But thank you, Jason, for your question. Caliph, a Patreon since July. Awesome. Welcome. Do you think Talos or Grotesques are more fitting to the current meta? And why? Or none of them? I think Grotesques are more attuned to the meta right now in like small units of 5. The reason being they just tend to be more versatile and not as expensive as the Talos. Talos are great. And originally, early in the edition, I was really big on Talos. But the deadlier armies get, the less I like using Talos, to be honest. Plus, with breachable terrain like ruins and stuff, Talos can just kind of get through things up and down floors. And they do mortal wounds and do a lot of attacks. So they can deal with like heavy stuff and deal with like hordes of infantry more than the Talos because they get better AP, and then they can like really support like the characters better. All in all, I've really been like I like the Grotesques a lot. Chris Lively, patron since May of last year. Thanks. Chris Lively says, besides Dark Technomancer and Blackheart, are there other viable ways to build armies? Well, right now, the viable in terms of competitive play, I've personally, Blackheart is just like an auto take for me when playing Drukhari. Having Vect in your back pocket is incredibly powerful for pretty much every matchup. Even if you're playing like a mix of like Harlequins and Coven put together, or Harlequins and like Drukhari, that sort of thing, maybe even Inari and Drukhari, like having that Blackheart is really, really good. As for the Coven stuff, Dark Technomancers has quickly become one of my favorites, simply because of the damage output, but it doesn't have the survivability as Prophets of Flesh do. So Prophets of Flesh feels like I have more stuff throughout the whole game. Dark Technomancers, I hit really hard, but my entire army dies by the end of the game. So it's a very different mentality and philosophy and gameplay. And to take either or on top of the other, you have to look at your play style and then basically say, do I like being tankier and like just being able to survive more, or do I want to hit my opponent hard enough that they just can't get back up? And that's the choice that you'll eventually have to make. Cameron, patron since March. So I'm building an Inari list and trying to decide between bringing in Harlequin Skyweavers and Craftworld's Shining Spears. I feel if you're going Inari, you want to go for the Shining Spears, personally. I feel like taking Harlequins as Inari, you're giving up way too much. Rising Crescendo is an incredible rule. The stratagems, the White Dwarf updates, like Harlequins, not Inari, are way more powerful than Inari Harlequins. So because of that alone, I would take the Shining Spears as Inari instead of the Harlequins. I hope that answers your question, Cameron. Joshua Bishop, patron since September, this September, so welcome. In a 2,000 point Drukhari army, which is better, 10 Mandrakes, Reavers, or Razorwing? I've been using Reavers. However, if you're doing the 10 Mandrakes, I'd go for 2 units of 5. Deep strike them and deploy them together as 1 unit of 10, but make sure they're 2 units of 5. That's what I would do. And I think that's probably the best of all those three for somebody who's especially like starting out or new to the game. Archon Eric, Patreon since May. So, new keyword, core, right? When will Drukhari be hit? To be honest, I don't know. I really don't know. I made the switch to Dark Technomonster gunboats with the Reapers, so I don't have the rerolls to hit and wound anymore. So I'm basically already used to not using that. When will Drukhari? At the same time as Space Marine, or only with a new codex? I'd say with a new codex. I wouldn't be surprised. What do you think the first big FAQ? Do you like the new keyword? Yes, I love the new keyword. I think it's gonna. I hope it changes the dynamic. Like you won't see just like a chapter master babysitting a bunch of aggressors. If they're not core, right? So yes, your aggressors get like a bazillion shots, but at least they're not going to be silly. Hey, Keith Davis. Hola, ¿cómo estás? Nice to see you. Thanks for tuning in. How should we adapt? You might look at other like HQ options, or it might make something like other things a little bit more like viable. Maybe the psychic powers from like the Incarn or whatever. You're taking an Ari, but all in all, I think taking things that didn't benefit from the reroll in the first place, just get used to not having the reroll. But then again, with a new codex, anything's possible. They're changing Marines so much that I wouldn't be surprised that they're going to change a whole bunch of other stuff as well. Awesome. So thank you so much for the questions directly on the Patreon page. So let's head on over to the questions on the Patreon Facebook page. And then we'll go to the Discord as well. And then we'll go to your questions right here on YouTube. So if you have a question, type. And if you haven't already, clickety-click the like button. And there we go. Henrik asks, action. If you advance in your movement phase, can you still raise the banner? You may not advance and do actions. You have to move onto the objective and place the banner, but you cannot advance and do actions. Gaz, using Dark Techno, 1 max mortal wound on each model per shooting round, i.e. Talus has 12 shots, roll 3 once, you only take 1 mortal wound. Can he take a power from pain roll? Great question, Gaz. So it's 1 mortal wound per weapon. So the Talos has 2 Haywire Blasters that are each D3 shots, right? So D3 shots per gun. So that's up to 6 shots per Talos. You just roll them each separately. And if you want to overcharge the gun, then you roll the hit, roll the wound with each one separately. Even if one gun rolls 3 ones, you only get 1 mortal wound per gun. So 1 Talos has 2 guns. It can only do 2 mortal wounds to itself total. Can you take a power from pain roll? Absolutely, because that's an ignore like damage roll essentially, or ignore a wound roll. So you can save it with a 6-up, right? However, once 1 Talos has a wound taken, all the other mortal wounds from the other guns technically would go onto that model, etc., to kind of not confuse everything. But that is a great question, Gaz. Thank you very much for that as well. I hope that answers your question. And then we go to the Discord. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. So I am Alex says, I'm finally accepting that I'm going to lose more games. I'm playing some Harlequins because I love the tricks and whatnot. I'm new to competitive play and I really struggle with how much of my army to engage with. That's a great question. I just played against an AdMech army. At the end, I realized that I played way too passively and was able to deal with my threats one at a time. How do you know how much of your army to engage with? So how do I know how much of my army to engage with? Has really come with practice. And to be honest, there's not much of a substitute in terms of that. Like you kind of like have a gut instinct and a gut feeling when you play certain matchups where in this matchup, I need to throw everything I have at them, or in this matchup, I can only afford to throw one thing at them, or they will kill everything. And so you kind of learning that is really what happens with a lot of experience, like over time. But to be honest, like I'd say trust your gut, right? Look at the army, and if your gut's saying, hey, go everything all in, then do it. If your gut's saying stay back, trust your gut. A lot of the times your gut has like a good understanding of what you need for the game. Also, in terms of setting up tables, how much terrain do you use? In my game, I think there was a massive lack of terrain in my armies we shot. So you need to have like 12 to 14 pieces of terrain on the table, and a lot of them should be like ruins that like obscure and block line of sight. I highly recommend you go to the WTC, the World Team Championship website, and look at their terrain layouts. They have 8 different tables that they do in like 2 or 3 different ways. So check out one of those table layouts and play with one of those layouts. It's excellent. It's balanced. It's great for competitive play. But terrain is a very, very important part of the game. Chindo Wen is up. Sure. Great name, by the way. I think it's generally accepted that putting one piece of obscuring terrain somewhere in each table quarter and then customizing it from there, or putting like a couple of like close to the middle of the board. Ideally, if you look at the way that the objectives are and the way that the deployments are, you can really kind of put terrain to make sure you have something to hide behind. You can advance to something that you can hide behind, etc., etc. Ariel Heiko asks, what is on your wish list for a new Drukhari Codex? I want to be able to have a redeployment stratagem, and I want to be able to use the webway in different ways to like come at my opponent from all different angles and like play the null deployment, because I love null deployment. Especially when it comes to faction-specific crusade rules. Oh man, crusade rules like taking prisoners back to the Dark City, and creating like a spectacle that people are watching on their like pleasure barge with the big screens, being like, that was a really cool move there. I thought that would be really fun. Thank you for your questions. Okay, let's dive into the questions on the YouTube direct feed here. But if you have any questions, now's the time to ask them. If you missed the live show, too bad. I cry a tear for you. Okay, so we have a question by Sean. What do you think is the best way to run witches? I know they're not great, but I was thinking about running them in groups of 10 as an Ari with the Incarn to give them reroll wounds. So reroll wounds is a great thing to have. However, if you're taking witches, I would more than likely take Incubi, because Incubi benefit a lot more from reroll wound rolls. That's my personal choice. As for witches, I take them in 5 strong with a blast pistol, and normally a Hydra Gauntlet for the reroll wounds, or a Shardnet and Impaler. Or worst comes to worst, just 5 with no upgrades. And I make sure the characters are doing the heavy lifting, not the witches, basically. That's my recommendation. Just more OBSEC all over the place. So instead of 1 of 10, 2 of 5. Even if it's in the same raider, 2 of 5. Hey, Skari, says Milith. What do you think are some good combos in an Ari and a triple patrol of Harlequin, Drukhari, and Eldari? So you mean one of each? Well, first of all, my thoughts on Inari Harlequins are pretty like straightforward. Don't take Inari as Harlequins. You miss out on so much. Like, oh man, like I wish that we had all the stuff Harlequins get, to be honest, personally. But if you had to, I'd make sure you had a unit of Harlequin bikes, a troop inside of a transport, and an HQ, right? Just a troop master. You don't need anybody else for the reroll wound rolls. And then I would take a Drukhari list with like an Archon or the Incarn or whatever, like a unit of Cavalite Warriors or Witches, 5 Witches probably, as many Incubi as you can put your hands on, and the Vizark for reroll ones to hit. And then I would take, in the Eldari, I'd probably take Wraith Seers, because you can make them super, super tanky, like 5 of Feel Pain and ignore, like halving damage and all this crazy stuff, -1 damage. Like they get really tanky. And then another one that can like regenerate every turn. It's really, really good. So keep that in mind. Reamer says, question. Other than playing games and getting reps, do you have any other methods to practice certain game mechanics and list interactions on your lists? I'm a very visual player, so I'll get a list that I'm taking to a tournament, and I will physically make sure I put it on the table and see how much space it takes up. I'll visualize it, and then I'll go through different deployments. So I'll go through like deployment for mission 1 through 9, and I'll kind of like practice different deployments to kind of see like if I put my units in certain ways, like in what area of the table they can go or how far they can move in a single turn, so that it's a very calculated way of me putting my army down so I can react to my opponent. But a lot of the times that's a way that I prepare. Another thing is you have to like, and I've said this before, when coaching, there's 4 main things that I look for. The first thing that I coach somebody on is understanding what your play style is and finding an army list that fits your play style, whatever the faction. If you're playing an army list that doesn't vibe well with you, you'll never get good at it. Once you've found a list that vibes with you, the second part is to play games with your list and memorize everything in your army. And I mean memorize. If you have to flip through your codex to find a stratagem or whatever, you haven't completed the stage. And it's a bit of a grind, but you need to do that. So that's the second part. You want to be competitive, learn your army, memorize your rules. And it might not be easy. However, it's incredibly important to understand what your army can do. And then the third part, not even going into the fourth part, but on the third part, you have to play the same list over and over and over and over. And even if you can't get games in, you have to maybe go through matchups and think about how your list would react to certain matchups. Basically, you have to do that over and over and over, because in some games, my Ravagers or my tanks are the screen, and in other games, my characters are the screen, and in other games, my infantry is the screen. But I know that because I've practiced so much. Michael Mcgowan. Did I say that right? Any advice for missions like Overrun? I played Death Guard and find it hard to pick secondaries on that mission with such a large deployment where my army wants to stay together. So you want to know, like, every time there's a mission that sort of like encourages you to sort of like deploy in a line, I'd pick, if you want to, you pick in the middle, and then you go one side or the other, or you pick one side and you just go up one side. You basically overwhelm one side, and then like give up on that and just kind of focus on crushing your opponent's flank. Basically, that would be my recommendation. Miller says, awesome. Thanks, Skari. I kept Harley's off Yanari. Should have mentioned that specifically for that Death Jester. Yes, Death Jester is great. Also, if you want to do Inari with Drukhari, Inari with Drukhari units, then Drukhari, and then Harlequins, that works really well too. Because you can take Inari Incubi with the Vizark. So you have units of Incubi with the Vizark for reroll ones and being an Ari for the reroll wounds. And then you take a patrol detachment or something of Drukhari with Drazar. Drazar still buffs the Inari Incubi because they don't lose their Incubi keyword. They just lose their, they lose their Drukhari keyword for Inari. But it means that you can have them together, fighting together, and then Drazar gives them +1 to wound, and they get access to reroll wound strats and reroll ones to hit from the Vizark. It's crazy. It's a combination of units that I'm thinking about using in like some cool list mechanic dynamics. Well, if you haven't already, click the like button. And that is, didn't even think of that, totally stealing that. Please do, Sean. Please do, because Inari's pretty sexy. Other than that, thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this Meta Monday analysis, which is normally something I do for Patreons. Today, I unlocked it for all of you to watch like last week. I must be going crazy because there's no paywall here. But if you'd like to support me on Patreon, click the link down below. Enjoy a positive community of like-minded gamers. Get list advice, hobby inspiration, and more. And of course, help me create more content as I do every single day and every single week. So I really appreciate it. You nailed the last name. Thanks a lot. That's exactly what I thought as well. Awesome. No problem. Michael, thanks a lot for tuning in. I've been Skari, your grateful host. Signing off until next time. Don't forget, there's a premiere tomorrow for the next battle report, Orcs versus Drukhari Crusade. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye, everybody. The dark. Well, technically, that's not how that works right now, because this is Meta Monday. Meta Monday analysis. Get on with it. Bye, everybody.